I'm tired of the same story being told the same way with the same characters. The same emotions, visual rhythms, stories, styles, music, blah, blah, blah. I've gotten bored with movies nowadays. There's little innovation and growth within our medium, not just in terms of technique, but also in terms of theory. I used to get excited when I would watch films, expecting to see and learn something new. Films tend to blend together to me, and I don't mean to sound like I'm not appreciative of art. Rather, I'm disappointed by what I'm given. I have high expectations, and I want to experience something new every time I watch a film. Of course, there's room for a turn your brain off movie, but when I want inspiration, I can rarely find it in films produced today. People are too quick to say something is great or the best film of the year, when in fact, most things are either poor or mediocre in comparison to films that actually reach those heights. And this isn't a pessimistic perspective, rather it's a logical and progressive one. My aim with all art forms is to express, communicate, and improve. Express our ideas and concepts, our feelings and emotions to what conditions we experience in our lives, to communicate themes and stories through a visual and audible medium. Themes of what being a human is about, improve our techniques and the actual art form along with the goal of improving the world with our art. This is a grand task, but nonetheless, it's what I expect to achieve when a project has several millions of dollars poured into it. Yet these projects fall on their face when attempting to have an impact on society and the medium. Rarely does the medium itself change due to one film, but I expect this trend to change. As Lennon stated, there are decades where nothing happens and weeks where decades happen. Art house films have failed to separate themselves from this feeling that I have. The feeling that films are mediocre and not improving on past techniques. Rather, filmmakers are repeating themselves, repeating their idols who have repeated theirs, with them failing to advance the medium to new revolutionary heights. Rather, they revisit the same stories, genres, situations, and so on. In the art house industry, I see four groups of filmmakers: the elders, the popular kids, the sellouts, and the weirdos. I'll cover each group and go into their role in the industry today and how they have impacted filmmaking as a whole. The elders, the godfathers of the art house side of filmmaking. Those who have passed away and those who are still with us but hold a legendary presence to this day. These filmmakers are incredibly influential in the industry and the art form. However, when I say an individual is influential, that does not equate them to being revolutionary. There's a stark difference. John Cassavetes kickstarted the do-it-yourself movement of filmmaking in the States after the Second World War, as cameras weren't accessible as they would be in the 80s and 90s for independent filmmakers, but handhelds had started to be manufactured for documentary purposes in the late 40s and 50s. His attitude was to go out and capture the story he wished to tell with stories that were gritty, realistic, and grounded. He achieved this by the use of intimate and claustrophobic close-ups and handheld cinematography. He inspired others to go out and shoot. This isn't revolutionary, but it's certainly a positive material outlook on expressing yourself, whether you're right or wrong. His techniques were uncanny at the time and borderline experimental, as his films were often amateurish, but that gave them a very different feeling than the Hollywood productions at the time. Cassavetes had separated himself from the rest with his techniques and his use of actors. To myself, as someone who's looking to break the long-standing traditions of theater and literature and filmmaking, his use of theatrical elements is what holds him back from really changing the course of film. Had he created realistic atmospheres and stories without the crutch of theater, along with a political and social fire to change American society, he could have changed the landscape of filmmaking forever with films that were separate from theater. You may ask, what's wrong with theatrical filmmaking? This is a great question, and I'll be sure to answer at the end of the video. As for now, know it's something that I view that's holding film back from reaching its full artistic potential. In Europe, there was Bergman, who was held as a titan of filmmaking then and now. However, my opinion of him isn't too high. He's a decent filmmaker, but really hasn't done that much to expand the medium's horizon, even for his time. His work was very stylish and atmospheric. He certainly had his own vision. He covered taboo topics such as the existence of God, sexual relationships, suicide, and so on. But to me, he never really changed my conception of what filmmaking could be. He's very influential to the coming generations, and his film spoke to several people who would become stars of filmmaking. This is perhaps due to the fact that he was a pessimistic existentialist more than anything, along with his aesthetics of presenting an image. A lot of people who have a basic comprehension of philosophy are drawn to existentialist questions. What happens when we die? Is God real? What is my purpose in life? Why am I here? To me, this is what Bergman offers, so there's little difference between him and any other existentialist filmmakers or authors. The difference is mainly on the aesthetic side and how he portrays these problems for people visually. His framing and use of color and light are often what drew people to him. His aesthetics made him stand out, but what he had actually been discussing had already been presented visually, just in a different style. Along with the techniques he was using, it wasn't really out of the ordinary compared to his contemporaries. And you can honestly lump filmmakers like Akira Kurosawa in this category as well. When your films are based mainly on a set of philosophical questions that have been asked and answered numerous times, it's hard to build something that efficiently improves the medium. It's not just playing the philosophical question, but also the concern of how we present these problems is really what elevates your communication skills with filmmaking. To me, the use of theater is a contradiction brought into our medium that pushes film to capture theatrical elements rather than real life. Techniques, of course, are crucial to making a great picture, but the question of making a film theatrical or not is key to our medium's growth. Terrence Malick is someone who I haven't gotten the chance to familiarize myself with yet, but from what I've seen and heard, he tackles existentialism too, often from a Christian perspective. His projects seem vaster and more grandiose due to the size of his stories, which are never linear and often fairly simple in terms of the plot. I can't speak in depth about him, but I know he sticks to theatrical elements to make his films, and I understand he holds a similar amount of influence like the others in this group. His impressionistic style of displaying minor details in a grand way brings the details of the film to a different kind of level. His use of wide-angle lenses, along with the shallow focus close-ups, always allow the audience to be brought in with the film's theatrical story. His techniques are unique based on how he utilizes them, and his narrative storytelling is more oriented to postmodernism. Yet again, the theoretical failure to separate from theater is what really prevented him and many other filmmakers from becoming revolutionary. Stanley Kubrick is one of, if not the best theatrical filmmaker of all time. Not only did he pose thoughtful philosophical questions, but he was constantly making social commentary with his films that one could spend hours covering and thinking over. His films were advanced and delicately put together, like a jigsaw puzzle for the audience to figure out as they viewed the film. His film, 2001: A Space Odyssey, is what solidified my interest in filmmaking. To me, Kubrick was the best, and there was little competition when it came to communicating complex social conflict and relationships. I was genuinely compelled to his meticulous style of directing, being a complete control freak and preparing for every single factor of his film. However, despite me being such a fan of Kubrick all throughout the past 5 years of my life, I really can't stand here and call him a revolutionary. I think his films are some of the best theatrical films ever made, but they are still rooted within theater, along with the fact that he heavily relied on literature to tell his stories, always adapting his stories from established material. He is no doubt a master of theatrical filmmaking, but my ultimate concern is that he did not push film to its fullest potential. His inability to separate from theater prevented him from pushing film to its next level and its key detail that needs exploration for us to really begin to master our medium. David Lynch has recycled through a lot of his ideas and really been doing the same style for the past 4 decades. He's gathered a massive fan base who loves his style and his personality. But again, I wouldn't say he's really pushed the boundaries of film, as surrealism has had a relationship with film for over a century. What he's been able to do is personalize the surrealist elements of filmmaking to make them meaningful to himself, and therefore meaningful to the story and its themes. Surrealism hasn't really evolved as an art form, though, and Lynch has perfected it to fit him, but outside of this, he hasn't changed film in the way the past revolutionaries have. Scorsese is another master of theatrical filmmaking, but he of all people is artistically bankrupt. He cannot go beyond his styles that he's known for. He has reached a plateau within theatrical filmmaking. He utilizes the same techniques over and over, and his stories all come with similar themes, as they have since his films in the 90s, and honestly probably before that too. He can't stop making gangster movies or grandiose dramas about ridiculously masculine men. He, to me, was never someone who pushed the medium's boundaries, but rather someone who was able to capture the feeling of a particular subculture, whether it be Italian-American, Irish-American, upper class, lower class, impoverished, Catholic, rock stars, etc. He knew how to communicate what a culture was through the use of theater. This is a great skill that he had, but it really only added onto theatrical filmmaking and not film itself. There's a couple others who fall in this category, but they all kind of have their limitations, as we'll find with those who are right at the top of their game now. They have mastered their style of expression, but it is the expression itself and the method in which one communicates that needs improvement, not their style nor personality. It's the fact that they have all slightly improved the standards of their past idols, but I'm not interested in slight improvements or minor progressions, but rather revolutionary change, something to completely turn the medium in a new direction. So what exactly did they all improve, and why isn't it up to my standards? Well, with filmmaking, or any art form for that matter, there are the following factors to consider improving: technique, industry, theory, social influence, and political relevance. As for techniques, these filmmakers all came up with more intricate ways of displaying theatrical films. More variety with angles, exaggerations of distance and space to create more specific feelings, extreme close-ups, wide establishing shots, POV shots, top-down angles, one-take shots, and so on. They expanded upon what the filmmakers like Hitchcock, Chaplin, Wells, and all those other guys established with the medium. The filmmakers that I've listed have built upon the techniques that were established prior, but the techniques fundamentally remain the same, and that's to display a theatrical story and not a visual expression bound by the specific nature of filmmaking. This meaning a film made with no theatrical elements, just a simple editing of images into a visual sequence built to communicate a story to the audience. All these filmmakers made improvements to the industry by flourishing in a market separate from Hollywood. Sure, some used massive distributors and financiers later in their careers, but they all started with the same independent flair that one would begin with now. For the most part, these filmmakers were the first indie filmmakers, which was a huge importance to this side of the industry. I hold no interest for developing my career in Hollywood. It's a shithole of toxicity. In my view, every filmmaker I've listed so far, even those with the stature of Kubrick, Scorsese, Godard, and Hitchcock, they've all failed to fully realize film's artistic potential. They have, however, in my view, fully realized the potential of theatrical filmmaking. The technical and theoretical improvements of theatrical films have already reached their heights decades ago, and now the improvements are merely stylistic changes or different narrative approaches within the story. I'm looking for structural change within our medium. What's the next logical step to improve filmmaking? I believe these filmmakers did not theoretically put us forward. Rather, it has been a stagnant motion, one that has been repeated by the filmmakers prior. The filmmakers today and in the prior generation have failed to truly advance the medium to its desired potential. And it's my aim to push the medium in a revolutionary direction. The social influence of these filmmakers has been a positive for the most part, as they've inspired several filmmakers to begin their careers. However, this inspiration is not with the revolutionary fire, but rather with a casual passion of an artist wanting to create. We want revolutionary filmmakers, people who will change the medium. Along with their use of theater, they haven't been able to fundamentally change people's view of capitalist society and make them question the future society from the one we live in today. They haven't been able to put forward a perspective that sees the working class as heroes, the workers as the people who really control society. This goes to the political relevance of the filmmakers I've named in this video so far. Most of their films stem from an apolitical or social democratic viewpoint, sometimes liberal or traditionally conservative as well. However, we know that central democrats, liberals, centrists, and right-wingers don't bring about revolution. Their political goal is to maintain the status quo, to not rock the capitalist boat. Their art was politically vanilla, nothing special, nothing to ignite the working class into a fever to smash capitalism. It is not inspirational nor informative to the workers. It did not push them to revolutionary activity. It rather pushed them to things like solitude or calm cultural discussions about what was presented in the film. As an aspiring filmmaker who desires to have an impact upon the world, I do not wish to be milquetoast. My favorite flavor of ice cream may be vanilla, but I have no interest in my art reflecting in this manner. I not only want to stand out as an artist in my own right, but I want to push people to be better and take control of their own lives. Yet the people I've discussed have only been concerned with the politics that concern individuals rather than a class of people. The conflict would be oriented around a moral, ethical, or existential question for the protagonist to battle with, rather than a battle between the classes. To be clear, I'm not saying one needs to be a Marxist to make art. Rather, I'm saying one needs to be a Marxist to make revolutionary art. Ultimately, those who we've discussed in this section have slightly improved certain techniques of film and have expanded theatrical film to its height. They have taken part in the building of the independent film industry, which is important for creating opportunities and a community for those not intoxicated with Hollywood culture. However, in my view, they have not furthered the theoretical balance of film at all, and their social impact and their political relevance has been limited to a small cultural section of art. These filmmakers that I've mentioned are the best theatrical filmmakers out there, but their time was 50, 60 years ago. Their ability to impact the medium has passed with time, as people look to their films for ideas, but not for revolution. The fact is they are bound to making films for theater, And this is the chain that holds down filmmakers today. The necessity to include actors, sets, costumes, playwriting, etc. It's my goal to separate film from this and build a community that aims to make films through the use of film's own natural components of editing and imagery, doing so by capturing real life and altering it to fit our artistic vision. The popular art house filmmakers have effectively done nothing to improve the medium. I'm talking about veterans like Paul Thomas Anderson, Wes Anderson, Darren Aronofsky, Quentin Tarantino, Bong Joon-ho, Charlie Kaufman, Robert Eggers, Ari Aster, Yorgos Lanthimos, the Safdie brothers, Ruben Östlund. There's other choices, of course, but all these filmmakers combine into having the same roadblocks of being unable to improve the medium. They've all clearly just been copying their idols with their own personal flair, and they've all had interviews where they openly admit to this. I'm all for taking after your idols, but when you do not significantly build off what they have developed, there isn't much genuine creation going into your artwork. The filmmakers that have exploded onto the scene in the past decade are victims to this, bringing nothing new to the table, as I've said. They are often just making stories with the techniques of other filmmakers with their own personal twist. The Safdie brothers are new filmmakers that have gained popularity from their last two pictures, Good Time and Uncut Gems. Both of these films are classified as thrillers and use a variety of techniques that are deprived from filmmakers like Scorsese and Cassavetes. They remind me of Star Wars fan filmmakers, honestly. They feel more like fangirls to me than original filmmakers. Sure, they are relatively new, but they are almost 40, and their creative styles still heavily ride on indie filmmakers of 50 years ago. This, to me, is a problem. You should go into the art form with the mindset that you are going to change the medium, not copy those who you look up to. Inspiration is normal for artists. Hell, so is stealing others' techniques. But it's not just copy-paste. You have to steal the foundation given to you and make it yours in a manner where you're challenging the medium. I'm sure this will bother fans of the film community because people have no problem seeing theatrical films and people really enjoy them. I don't. They're boring to me, and they really haven't changed much since they've reached their height. My view is we need to work on improving the medium, changing it for the better. There's always something to improve, and my view is that it starts with separating from theater. Other popular filmmakers like Paul Thomas Anderson and Ari Aster have also been very open about the artists they take from. PTA has openly admitted to changing very little choreography on some of his shots because he adored them when another filmmaker did them first. He at least tries to be very humble about this, sometimes not even claiming his art, and giving ownership to the people before him, which is admirable. All of Ari Aster's pictures have been derived from films in the 60s and 70s. He really isn't too innovative with the craft, and again, this is a near 40-year-old man who should have found his artistic voice by now. His new film, Beau is Afraid, really fell flat on his face, and that was him trying to make something unique, but it really just showed you how much of an ass he is. Hell, even Quentin Tarantino has stated several times that he takes very heavily inspiration on the subgenre of film that he's focused on. His films are littered with references from the old Hollywood era. A lot of his films are more so homages to the genre than they are original stories. He can't really be proclaimed as original. He's more of a fanboy of theatrical films. To clarify, this occurs a lot in art, but it's when someone separates themselves from the rest that they are seen differently. Take Picasso, for example. He came into the painting scene with the rest of the Impressionists, taking what they had concluded about art and he built upon it. He met with surrealists and absurdists in the 1910s and found his own conclusions about melding all the art movements together by forming Cubism. His artworks were unorthodox, but he forced people to see things differently with his own vision of what painting should be. He was looking for ways to revolutionize the medium, and once he did, he began to focus on how to communicate with his new genre of painting. He displayed his communist views on certain events that had occurred throughout the time of World War II. And he did so in a way that only Picasso could. The lesson being that he was in a very saturated camp in the 1890s by being with all the other Impressionists. But once he came into contact with surrealism and its absurd philosophy, his own ideas began to break off, and he discovered how to involve the Impressionistic style through the use of Cubism. Rather than using brushes or dots, he began to use shapes to compose an image. Combine this with unorthodox framing of the shapes and putting them together in an unconventional manner, there was nothing like it. So in contrast, there's nothing wrong with being in a camp of thought, nor taking influence or inspiration from another artistic group. It's when you don't build off of it. That's when you've compromised yourself as an artist and you limit yourself to your own short-term vision of wanting to create something for the sake of creation. That's the trap that a lot of filmmakers have fallen into now. They fall in love with the medium and begin to emotionally create projects right away, but never learn the detailed history of how things have transpired, how theater was first brought into film, and understanding the logical need to break from it in order to artistically liberate film. Instead of understanding the reasoning and relationships within the nature of film, filmmakers tend to just create what they'd like. Again, there isn't anything wrong with this. It's just that it doesn't put forth revolutionary art, which is my primary concern. Once these naive artists get their works out and become successful, they're often bought out by Hollywood to make corporate crap. This is the danger behind not understanding the medium and having a solid, meaningful purpose behind the art you create. If you merely create art for the sake of creation, then you are easily bought to create something that continues to dull the consciousness levels of the working class. These people I'm talking about are the sellouts, the people who take a giant paycheck in order to compromise their own artistic projects to then make the most dull and watered-down project of the year. Greta Gerwig did it with Barbie. Chloe Zhao and Nia DaCosta did it with Marvel. Taika Waititi and Barry Jenkins did it with Disney. There's a bunch of other examples that I don't want to go in depth with. You guys get the point. When you go into the communications industry without a direction, you're bound to find yourself supporting the industry that takes advantage of people who work to maintain it. On top of the fact that the films that they're being paid to make are absolute dog shit. They aren't inspiring to people to change the world and improve society. Quite the opposite. All the film companies like Disney, Warner Bros., Fox, the films they produce are meant to further divide the working class along the lines of race, gender, and sexuality. Hollywood uses a film to further their culture war narratives on Democrats versus Republicans, when in actuality, the whole argument of the two-party system is ancient garbage. The film industry peddles out crap to distract people for what is really bothering them in their life. And when problems are addressed, they're done so in a manner where everyone can be happy at the end, and the conflicts of someone's life aren't really explored, and even worse, solutions aren't genuinely presented. They're glossed over and mildly addressed, so that these companies can say they did something to support minority groups, when in actuality, this whole marketing campaign completely changed when selling the film to a country that is notoriously racist or sexist. The point is these sellouts fall down the pipeline of working with and eventually for Hollywood's needs. This is the equivalent of the artists dancing with the devil. The fact that Hollywood are placating to minorities to seem progressive is an embarrassment for them. People often do not need to be told that everyone has the same equal human value when it comes to existence. That no matter your race, gender, nor sex, you can lead a group of people and take control of your life and improve society. People know this. We aren't stupid. Yet Hollywood is moronic enough to think that they need to say that they also believe this. That's how out of touch they are. Not to mention Hollywood's history of abuse towards any minority you can think of in the past 120 years. Their philosophy is this: use films as an investment to create a profit for shareholders, all while trying to appease to the concerns of the masses when really you're distracting them from taking affirmative action in their own lives. I'm going to make a whole separate video about Hollywood and how fucking much they suck and all that shit in a different video, but now let's move on. The last group we have, the Weirdos. These are the filmmakers who are trying to make films outside of the given conventions, yet they're still staying within the bounds of theater. Each of these filmmakers have had their fair share of experimentation within theatrical filmmaking. The reason, however, that I bring up these filmmakers up is to point out that this experimentation is limited due to the fact that they're staying within the bounds of theater. They've all tried to change the medium with their exaggeration of a specific component of film, the image. Mind you, I view their techniques as exaggerations and not expansions of our art form. Some have expanded theatrical storytelling with some of their techniques, but in my opinion, it is not to the benefit of filmmaking. There's a simple dynamic between two main film components, which is the edit and the image. This dynamic is best explained by understanding the functions of both components. The image's job is to display a moving image that has been captured by a camera. The edit's job is to connect these images to bring the puzzle together. Both the image and the edit are necessary, but the argument is which one holds more weight when making the film. What purpose does the piece serve if it cannot be connected to the others? The puzzle must be completed, and there needs to be a tool to do this. For puzzles, it's the design of the pieces. For film, it's the edit. The edit is the glue that holds the images together to make sense. The images are put together in a fashion to bring the filmmaker's vision to life on the screen. The filmmakers in question have their artistic focus more oriented around the image than the edit. This is a theoretical error, as it fails to understand that without the edit, we do not have a cohesive story. These experimental filmmakers don't hold their values to improving filmmaking. Rather, their focus is mainly on standing out from other filmmakers. They view the best way to do this is to try and expand certain aspects of the image, whether it be color, framing, motion, light, etc. They are trying to grow their vision in this realm. So their worries are more concerned with the stylistic part of the vision rather than how it fits all together as a big picture. Take Bellatar, for example. His films have been heavily critiqued for not editing enough, holding on one image for too long. And I don't mean 5 seconds or 15 seconds or even a whole minute. Some of his shots last over 5 minutes long, with minimal technical and theatrical activity. He's not only trying to portray the images in some glorified and excessive manner, but he's doing so with a minimal aesthetic. His films have failed to really change the landscape of the medium, as the only thing he's exploring is having an image on screen for an excessive period of time. Time is a core concept in a lot of his films, but the way he's chosen to communicate about it hasn't really attracted the audience towards his work seriously. Lav Diaz is another one similar to Tar, and his stories are much more relatable to the audience. They often cover family or cultural conflicts in the Philippines. These two are more traditional in their approach to theatrical filmmaking, in the sense that there's minimal movement and the camera mainly sits back and simply portrays the action. However, the filmmaker Gaspar Noé makes the camera the action. With incredible movements, he pulls the audience into his stories. He is known for these gimmicks that separate him from the rest of the indie crowd as a creative filmmaker. His techniques are certainly creative, but they are a bit more style over substance at times. A lot of his stories are linear narratives. It's mainly the camera movement and other aesthetics that he tries to play around with. There's of course other filmmakers that have experimented in similar ways. Not to mention the experimenters in the 50s and 60s did accomplish a thing or two. The biggest group would probably be the structuralists like Michael Snow, Stan Brakhage, Jonas Mekas, and Hollis Frampton. I'm definitely going to make a separate video for these filmmakers and their impact on film. Plot and character arcs prevent filmmakers from expanding past certain rules that they have to remain within. Theatrical filmmaking has really reached the point where it can no longer flourish and grow, only stagnate. Like every aspect of nature, nothing always progresses. Things are always changing, even when it seems they are not. The history of film has shown this with how the industry has made the switch to digital filmmaking. Filmmaking continues to change as an industry and culture, but progression is the kind of change I want. I'm not interested in slight technological change nor cultural changes within film. I'm rather interested in a total social and artistic revolution. In this video, my aim was to display how these filmmakers really haven't dictated a genuine progression in our medium. They've only continued to move it sideways. They all remain within theater, and it's here where I restate our aim as a channel. We aim to progress filmmaking. It's our perspective that the only way to progress the medium is to separate from theatrical elements that film has been tied to since its inception. We don't need characters, plot, costumes, and sets to tell our story visually. We can go and capture real-life events and manipulate them with the use of the edit to tell the story the way we desire. It's with the edit that we dictate how the audience takes in the visual information. When we conclude that the edit is greater than the image, although both are necessary, then we can begin to move our medium forward. I must state that these ideas I have are not the first time that this has been brought to the forefront of discussion. A century ago, many filmmakers came to the same conclusions. Two key filmmakers that we align ourselves with are Sergei Eisenstein and Dziga Vertov. Eisenstein was able to see the vital importance of the edit. Although his theory was not perfect, and he never did separate from theater, he's arguably one of the most important, if not the most important, filmmaker in history. Without him, films would be edited entirely different. This, of course, is due to the Moscow Film School, which again is something we'll cover in another video. The other filmmaker is Vertov, who made non-theatrical films, most notably The Man with the Movie Camera. This film, in my opinion, is the most revolutionary film I have ever seen, making it the most crucial to building our theory upon. His ability to separate from theater and build a visual story using the elements of real life, something we simply haven't seen on an equivalent level since his productions in the 30s. He's absolutely key to understanding how we progress filmmaking and how we build our revolutionary theory. That's ultimately why I made this channel. To build a community that also wants to progress filmmaking, that wants to see new films and different avenues of visual expression. My interest isn't in making YouTube videos, it's in making revolutionary films. This is why I'm making a channel, to put my perspective out there and gain support from my audience. Everything I do is to improve myself to become the best filmmaker I can be. I'm hoping you can join me on my journey to making revolutionary films and bringing a revolutionary perspective to the independent film industry. For those who disagree, this is only what I think, and you can judge my thoughts based on how I communicate them to you. And if there are any problems with how I've conducted my argument, please leave your opinions below so I can adjust accordingly. I'm not the best with words, so some of my explanations may be incomplete because they only make sense in my head when I'm writing them. I highly encourage you to voice your opinion and communicate your perspective. I don't have an interest with people just agreeing with me or blatantly disagreeing with me. I want an open dialogue with my community. My goal with this channel is not to simply express myself, but to build a media platform that explains and builds support for my film theory of revolutionary filmmaking. This will lead to the support of my future projects to come, along with the building of a community who aims to make films with the same revolutionary fire. Throughout the coming months, my theory will be explored and expanded upon for the audience and community to take into consideration.